There is a specific feeling that hits people who grew up in the 1970s. You are sitting at a dinner table, watching someone have a full meltdown because the restaurant got their order slightly wrong. Or you are watching a grown adult panic because their phone battery dropped to 20%. And somewhere deep inside you, a quiet voice says, "We just weren't built like this." You don't say it out loud because it sounds arrogant, but you feel it. A fundamental difference between the way you process the world and the way the world seems to operate now. And here is what's fascinating: psychology can actually explain exactly why that feeling exists and why it isn't arrogance. It is neuroscience. If you grew up in the 1970s, your brain was forged during what researchers now call a critical developmental window, a narrow slice of modern history where children were given something that has since almost completely disappeared: genuine psychological freedom, and the traits it built in you are becoming rarer by the decade. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you love research-backed psychology like this, my newsletter community goes even deeper. Link is in the description. The first trait is what psychologists call unconditional emotional calibration. In the 1970s, nobody handed you a trophy for showing up. If you struck out at baseball, you sat down and watched the kids who didn't. If you cried about something trivial, an adult looked at you and said, "You're fine, walk it off." That sounds harsh through a modern lens, but developmental research tells a different story entirely. Studies on emotional resilience show that children who weren't shielded from minor disappointment developed what psychologists call a frustration tolerance baseline, a neurological set point that determines how quickly you spiral when things go wrong. Your baseline is high, not because you're cold, but because your nervous system spent an entire childhood learning that discomfort is survivable. That is why you can absorb bad news, process it, and keep moving, while watching others crumble over inconveniences you barely register. The second trait is something researchers call deep analog attention. When your favorite show came on once a week, you watched it, every word. You didn't scroll while it played. You didn't pause it to check something. You were present because there was no alternative. When someone talked to you, you listened, really listened, because that conversation was your entertainment. Research on pre-digital attention patterns shows that people who grew up before on-demand media developed significantly stronger single-focus concentration and higher retention of verbal information. Your brain was never trained to split its attention across 15 simultaneous inputs. This is why you can read a long book in one sitting, while everyone around you struggles to finish a 3-paragraph article. This is why you can sit in a meeting and actually absorb what's being said, instead of mentally drifting in seconds. Your attention isn't old-fashioned. It's a cognitive luxury that the modern world accidentally destroyed in everyone who came after you. The third trait runs even deeper, and most people have never had a name for it. Psychology calls it social triangulation. Your neighborhood was your entire social ecosystem. You didn't get to curate it. You couldn't mute people or unfollow them. You had the weird kid on the block, the angry neighbor, the generous family 3 doors down, and the strange man who collected something no one understood. You had to navigate all of them. You had to read real faces, real tones, real silences, not emojis and reaction buttons. Research on childhood social environments shows that children who learned social skills through unfiltered, unmediated real-world interaction developed significantly stronger nonverbal communication reading and interpersonal intuition. You can walk into a room and sense the tension before a single word is spoken. You can tell within minutes whether someone is trustworthy. That isn't a gut feeling. That is a finely tuned social radar built through thousands of hours of actual human navigation that modern childhoods simply don't provide anymore. The fourth trait is what developmental psychologists call internal identity formation. You had no social media, no algorithm reflecting a curated version of you back at you, no comment sections telling you who you were or weren't. Your identity didn't form through external validation. It formed through experience. You figured out what you liked by actually trying things. You figured out who you were by being alone with yourself long enough to find out. Recent research shows that adolescents who develop their sense of self before the era of social media have measurably more stable identities and significantly lower rates of identity-based anxiety in adulthood. Because your self-concept was never built on likes or follower counts, it cannot be dismantled by them either. This is why you have a settled, quiet confidence that doesn't need the room to agree with you. Your identity isn't a performance. It was built in private, and that makes it unshakable. The fifth trait is the one that ties everything together. Researchers call it resourceful creativity, but the 1970s had its own term for it: make do. If something broke, you fixed it. If you were bored, you invented something to do. If you wanted entertainment, you built it out of nothing: sticks, dirt, a hill, a cardboard box, and an afternoon. There were no kits, no instructional YouTube videos, no step-by-step guides. You figured it out or you went without. Studies on unstructured play and problem-solving show that children who had to create solutions from scratch developed what psychologists call divergent thinking capacity, the ability to generate multiple original solutions to a single problem. It is the cognitive foundation of every inventor, entrepreneur, and innovator. You don't wait for someone to hand you the answer. You construct it. And in a world increasingly dependent on templates and pre-built systems, that wiring is extraordinarily rare. Every time you feel out of step with the modern world, every time you feel like you lack patience for problems that seem trivially small, remember this: you aren't behind. You aren't outdated. You aren't a relic. You are carrying forward a set of psychological traits that took an entire childhood of freedom, friction, and genuine experience to build. The emotional steadiness that looks like coldness, that's calibration. The focused attention that looks like stubbornness, that's depth. The quiet confidence that looks like indifference, that's an identity that was never for sale. You grew up in an era that, without knowing it, was running the most effective psychological development program in human history. And the world built you exactly right. Drop a comment below. What's the one thing from growing up in the 70s you miss the most? And if you want more research-backed psychology that finally explains who you are and why you're wired the way you are, subscribe. Because the next video might show you something about yourself you've never been able to put into words.